Hi, my name is Ola Sage with eManagement, and it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Pamela Loprest of the Urban Institute. And just a little bit about the Urban Institute. The Urban Institute gathers data, conducts research, and evaluates programs, and offers technical assistance, oversees and educates Americans on social and economic issues. A little bit about Dr. Loprest. She is a labor economist and has been conducting policy research for over 25 years on ways to improve labor markets and help workers and families. And one side note in terms of her connection to A Wider Circle, she was one of the original board members of A Wider Circle who has recently moved to the Boston area. But we're happy to welcome you back and thank you for your presentation today.
So I'm going to time myself so I don't talk too much. So it's so exciting. Can you hear me? Is this working? Yeah. It's so exciting to be here and to see everybody here. It's just overwhelming. I'm so happy. I'm a little different than some of the other presenters here. I don't run a program and I'm not working directly on the front lines with people in poverty, but I am working on this issue all the time. And I go to a lot of conferences and they are not like this. The audience is way different. And I'm going to say a little bit about that. Who am I? Because I kind of thought when I looked at the list of presenters, who am I? Why am I here? As Ola said, I'm a labor economist and I work doing policy research. And what I really think about what that is and what I'm trying to accomplish is to convince people to care about poverty. And I don't think I need to do that in this room. And that's kind of what I have to do a lot of time when I'm speaking. But there is kind of a connection to that, which is convince people to do something. What can we do to end it? And for me, in my work, I am about looking at evidence and facts that can help convince people that they should care about poverty and that they can end poverty. And I really think talking about solutions is what we all need, because it can be so overwhelming to talk about and think about and look at the costs and the difficulties and the reality of poverty, and it can be depressing. So when I try and convince people to care about poverty, I want to convince them by telling them, hey, there is things that are being done right now that work, and we just can do more. And so hopefully bring them along. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I think we need to know what poverty is to end poverty, and I think poverty is bigger and different than what sometimes people talk about. This is the nice chart that I use as an economist, and my friend said, don't show a lot of numbers. Nobody wants to see a lot of numbers. But this is the dollars. Every newspaper person or media person I talk to, every person on the Hill, every state government person I talk to, I don't want to say just the percent of poverty, although the percents are overwhelming. I want to talk about the dollars, and I want people to think about the dollars, because that's the way you know what it means. And so you can see what the dollars are, and this is 2013. But I want to just do a 2-second thought experiment, which is the $50 experiment. Say you have $50 in your pocket. If you're, like me, you can think, well, maybe I buy my Starbucks for $3, and I could buy a good dinner, and I can buy my lunch when I'm at work. I go out and maybe have a sandwich, costs $7. And I think about what I can do with $50. And, maybe I'll even have a little left over at the end of the day. But you think about if you're in poverty and you're trying to do that, feed yourself for 3 meals, but also you need to leave a little bit for your rent and a little bit for your heat and everything else. And if you want to think about this is really $1,600 a month. And so it's really, think about that. It's really hard to think about being able to buy everything you need to do with it. And then the reality, $50 a day is really the poverty line for a family of 3. So you got to feed your 2 kids too, and you got to buy them what they need. It's ridiculous. It's just such a small amount of money. And 46.5 million people were living in this
in this dollar amount. So it's really, what is poverty? It's the lack of ability to meet your basic needs. It's really such a low level when we talk about that. But then there's relative poverty, which is another, a term that we as economists use to try and get people to bring their mind out a little bit. All the government statistics in the United States are on the absolute poverty that I just showed you, but really poverty about not being able to participate fully in accepted life. I really like that term. It's really, even in economic terms, that you are spending such a high percentage of your income on basic needs that you cannot participate fully in life. It's a comparison to the average. And even though, like I said, people told me not to show graphs, but this is just the income distribution in the United States. I just think it's more like a heuristic to think about. Our income distribution, there is so much wealth in this country. There's so much wealth in this county. There's so much wealth that every person in this country is, it's in their face every day. You think about when you look at the front of the Washington Post and you see that woman with a baby and that's poverty. Think about being in poverty and every day seeing the wealth. That's when we think about relative poverty. And it's why some of the programs here and people talk about, we have to think about something much higher than the poverty level when we think about who we want to help and where we want people to be. So that's, I think, a really important thing to think about too. And it's another little piece of information to throw in. We know the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. If you work full-time and earn the minimum wage, you actually make more than the poverty line for one person, than the absolute poverty line. And we all think about $7.25 an hour. One little fact, this is where the minimum wage gets you. In no state can a full-time minimum wage worker afford a one-bedroom or a two-bedroom unit at fair market rent. Fair market rent is 60% of the average in an area. So it just makes you think the minimum wage is higher one, just. The other definition of poverty is social exclusion. Actually, this is an actual lovely term that's used in the European Union. It's part of the Charter. There are countries in the industrialized world that are actually thinking about this. And what it is really what I think we want to get to when we think about poverty. It is broader than money. You cannot just give people money and solve poverty, right? This is really about fully participating to your capacity, and that everyone in society is doing that. When I think about work that I've done and what this means, I think about a study we did talking to really poor women with children in Los Angeles, trying to understand what kinds of help they need and could use and how government systems were or were not helping them. And this is the picture of social isolation and social exclusion. This is a poor woman with two young children living in Los Angeles. And we have this picture and we ask them to fill it out with us. We work on it. The inner circle is the people who are close to you, the people who really help you, who like on a weekly basis are giving you help. And then the next circle a little bit out, and then the next circle a little bit out, and then we ask them who their stressors are. And my typing skills isn't great, but the middle circle, instead of social, it's supposed to be social worker. That was the only person she put in the center of her circle. I mean, this is social isolation, right? Money is not just the answer here. So, impacts of poverty. I'm not going to really talk about impacts of poverty because I think we all know a lot about that, but not that it's not important to study and know and have evidence, I think, to show people the true impacts of poverty. But the other part of poverty is that it's not static, right? We heard about that with the wonderful speaker we had this morning. I like to think about poverty is something that steals people's future. Because if you are poor today, you are more likely to be poor next year, your children are, and it goes on and on. One graph about poverty for children, and it just says what I said, that if you're born in poverty, the chance of you staying in poverty all the years of your childhood are very high. And so poverty begets poverty, and we really need to think about that too. So all of those are about what is poverty and needing to know what it is if we're going to end it. So what does ending poverty look like? So I wanted to just ask people here, since all of you are, I'm sure, extremely committed to ending poverty, and that's why you're here on this Saturday. Just a couple of people. What does ending poverty look like to you? What would be different in your mind if poverty was ended today? Does anybody want to share something? Kids would have confidence. Opportunity. Jobs. People would have jobs. Safety. People would be safe. People would have more choices. People would have a home. People would have motivation.
Improving the nation, strengthening the nation.
Would strengthen. It would strengthen the nation from the community outward. Sir? People would be happier.
Healthy.
People would be healthy. So I think all of these are just, it's exactly what we want to do. Like, think about what would it look like? What would it look like? And so here is my framework, which I think you all already really said, of what it would look like to end poverty. Everyone has their basic needs met. So people would have homes. People would have food. Everyone has the opportunity to fully participate and realize their potential. That people would have choices. They'd have opportunities to do. That the circumstances by which poverty is created would be addressed so that we don't perpetuate. And that the impacts of the legacy of poverty are addressed. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end because I think that's really important as well. So I want to talk now about what works to end poverty. I feel like as I was thinking about this presentation, kind of overwhelmed with the number of things I could have picked out to tell you about that are working to end poverty. I want us to be excited and optimistic about that because I think there is so much going on in this country. The examples at this conference are just blow my mind, and there's some of the best examples in the country. So it's hard to pick. And I'm just really going to give you like little snippets of all different things, so I'm not going in depth about any of these. And I could tell you more about them if you're interested or give you more information. But it's really to kind of just try and run through and give us a lot of different pieces. So I picked a few. So meeting basic needs. What are we doing to meet basic needs? Well, I personally spend a lot of time trying to convince people that taxpayers' money is not wasted by being spent on programs that help people meet their basic needs. And it's a little sad that that has to happen, but it's really important. But I think it's important for all of us to know, because it's not only them, but us who sometimes fall into the government doesn't work, it doesn't do anything, is broken. Safety net programs in this country, unemployment insurance, SNAP, which is a food stamps program, the earned income and child tax credits, these are all government programs that our tax dollars go to support. They are working to keep some people out of poverty. If you put it all together, these and some other programs, by a supplemental measure of poverty that we use now, poverty is almost cut in half. If you took away those programs, you would have twice as much. So we have a lot of poverty, but we would have a lot more. These programs are very, very key. I think, and the recent fights over SNAP and the Farm Bill, if any of you in the Washington area have heard about that, we need to not lose what we have here in our effort to move forward and continue to end poverty. And I think that that's really important. So I always want to say this because I don't think we often enough think about that, and it's really, really important. In my work in interviewing people and talking to people, I hear a lot of problems about government programs, and there's a lot to work on to fix it, I'd be the first to say. But we also hear some positive things. So I'd like to talk about one program just for 2 seconds, the Women, Infant, and Children's Program that provides nutrition to women with infants and young children. And, it's a staggering fact that more than half of the infants in this country and a quarter of pregnant women and children under 5 receive WIC. I mean, just let it sink in. It just boggles my mind. And it's a good thing because it's really, really important in their lives, and it's a sad thing because it means that they're they're poor, they're in poverty. But WIC, really does great things, and there's lots of studies that show all different things, and one of the things that often people are asking us in Washington is the ROI, the return on investment, and WIC is great. $1 of WIC reduces healthcare costs in the first 60 days of life by between $2 and $4. I mean, it's huge, right? Nothing in government has that great an impact. So it's an important program. And talking to women, again, the women in Los Angeles that we were talking to, every single one of them talked about how WIC helped them. And that social worker in the center, she was a WIC worker. So I'm not going to read this out, but it's really important to people. So we can meet basic needs, we can help people, and I would argue the programs like this, done right, not done badly, and there are plenty of government programs done badly, done right, can empower and help and make things better beyond even the nutrition, the bread and milk and eggs that they're giving them. So providing opportunity. There are so many examples of programs that are working, that are helping to provide opportunity. I put a couple of things here. There is evidence base for individual programs doing all of these things and doing them well. So I can't talk about all of them, and so I'm going to just move on to talk about one area that I work in a lot, but I think it's really important. And these providing opportunity, it's providing the tools for people to be able to meet their own potential. Just like we want for our children, just what we want for all children, right? So doing that is really important. We also, I'm sure it seems like it just came in, have seen this much. There's many different ways. It's basically talking about how much more money you make in a lifetime if you had a higher education. And we often hear about the college premium, but it's all the way down. If you don't finish high school, that's a lifetime of lost capacity. So all of these things are really important. Well, I'm working on a set of programs that are trying to help people who have not completed high school and often have less than an 8th grade education move into labor market skills that will help them get to a higher level wage. And there's many different programs around the country like that. The ones I'm working on are trying to help people move into healthcare fields, but there's a lot of failed programs in this area too. So it is not an easy thing, but there is evidence of ways that work. Programs that not only provide training for people, but recognize people need to maybe bump up their basic skills, that they need childcare or transportation or other help, that they need tuition, they need the dollars. Often, and almost all the time, they have to work at the same time because they have to be able to survive. So programs that take them into account. And I put the compass here because we talk about navigation, which is meeting people where they are, both to understand that this could be a person who is the first person in their family to ever step foot in a community college. They don't feel comfortable. You want to set them up to succeed, not to fail. You want to work with them and what are you interested in? Not here is the training you are going to. You are going to be a nurse's assistant. What if you don't like that? Really navigating and moving people to success. And with that idea of success can happen. So there is a lot of work going on and evidence that these programs can work. They're not inexpensive. If you think, I guess it depends on what you think is expensive, but there are evidence that the costs are far outweighed by benefits. And this is just some of the results from some of these studies. I just put it up here. But the very last one shows you, the earnings for participants. This is a big, when you think about back to that poverty level we were talking about, $4,500 in 2 years. It's big. So then I want to just talk about the next piece of solutions, the type of solutions, and that is addressing the factors that create poverty. And it's so important that we think about what is it that is beginning and continuing the cycle of poverty and try and address it. It's like a medical model of prevention strategies. We want to do things that help people not enter into poverty. And by that, I think I think about systems and structures in our country that perpetuate poverty. So we talk a lot about individual help and helping individuals and providing individual opportunity, and it's hugely important. But we also need to think about the structures of society and the policies and the ways that things are organized that perpetuate. So I'm not sure what order I put this in, but, well, so I wanted to talk about one. This is a program that's just an amazing, wonderful program in New Haven. And it thinks about the quote-unquote barriers, which is like a word that we use for the challenges that all of us have in our life, but that really can make it difficult for someone in poverty to move forward. And this group, realizing the group of moms in New Haven who needed jobs to be able to survive, but had serious mental health issues that weren't being dealt with. And they said, instead of creating a program that is, I'm going to fix this problem, they said, what is perpetuating the poverty in this community going on and on? Part of it is this mental health issue. Part of it is the inability to get work and to parent because of that. So we're going to form a community, and we're going to have this vision, and the group works together and helps each other, and yes, gets services to help or alleviate mental health, but it's really a new model of moving forward for how things can be different. So it's a really great program. I can tell people more about it. But the other thing that I was starting to talk about, in addition to programs like this, is policies, changing basic policy. I'm not going to get into a discussion here about the minimum wage. There's many, many fights about, how high can you go and how good can it be? But we all know here that $7.25 an hour, no one can live on. It's just not possible in our society. And so raising the minimum wage is so important. So that's like one headline is from how Connecticut raised the minimum wage. We know DC is making this great strides forward. It's a really, really important part of what we can do. It's a really important part of what we can do to change the structures. We talk about getting people into work, but if the wage that you can earn is so low, it just doesn't make sense. So it's part of the issue. And then paid sick leave I put up here as well, because this is a policy that I've worked on a lot. San Francisco passed one of the first paid sick leave ordinances in 2006, and it's really, I think it's a very, very important kind of equal rights issue, but it's certainly something that is about the structure of society that an individual can't change. Paid sick leaves just means that when you go to work, you have a few, most of these laws, it's like up to 5, I think, in a year, days you can take off and get paid. And not only that, you don't have to come to work when you're sick and make other people sick. You don't have to miss the appointments that your child had that were going to keep him from whatever it was, not doing well in school, getting suspended, not going to their appointment, and so having a chronic asthma attack. All of the things that happen in people's lives, and you cannot even take a day off from work. So that structure is in the way. If I give you opportunity and I get you training and you get the job and you get sick and you lose the job, it's really a perpetuation of poverty. So this is one of the things that we need to do and think about to really be able to change the things that cause poverty. There's a lot of things like this, but. So my last grouping in my framework of things, different kinds of solutions, and I should say this, New York just passed this. I mean, this is like a movement and it's going, so I want to be positive. I kind of said that in a negative way, but it's really, there are a handful of cities across the country. Connecticut also passed a paid sick leave law. And by the way, this is one of the things that I think is really important about it. The evaluation of the law in San Francisco found there was not a decline in employment. Employers did not move out of the city and jobs did not decrease. And part of the reason is that a large percentage of employers were already giving paid sick leave, but there were those segment of the employers who weren't. And they needed to kind of have this law to bring those that are kind of what we might call low-road employers along. So it's really important to understand that we evaluate this, we look at this, it doesn't have the effect of decreasing employment. my last thing before I go on to my next piece of the framework, which is healthcare reform, which I know is not yet evaluated, and we don't see all the impacts of it yet. It's just happening. But what we do know is that lack of health insurance, while definitely part of the basic needs, I would argue, the ability to have medical care, is certainly one of the biggest things to changing the factors that create poverty. Because if you become sick and you have nowhere to go, then poverty escalates. Then you lose your job, then your kids are, it goes forward. In addition, if you, in our system, become sick and don't have health insurance, and you take that one ambulance ride and you have no insurance and they charge you $500, could set you back all the way back to square one. So there's a lot of wonderful things about health insurance too. So the last piece of the framework is addressing the impact of the legacy of poverty. And when I talked about persistence and that poverty in one person's life and then in their children's life goes on, that's true for communities as well. And I think I put so discrimination and racial segregation, concentrated poverty, the fact that toxic landfills and dumps are people of low-income communities are more likely to be next to them. All of these things are the legacy of poverty that continues on and on, that really we need to address. So this is just a quote, and it's really long, but talking about what that means to live in a community where the community has been decimated by poverty. And it's not just, it's more than the sum of the individuals in poverty. It is the loss of community. It's a loss of a social fabric. This comes from a program called Moving to Opportunity, which was trying to help individuals it was an experiment by giving them money and allowing them to move wherever they wanted to be able to get out of these communities, and looking at what happened. And a lot of people moved, and there was significant increases in quality of life for many people, but it actually wasn't as successful as had hoped. And there's a number of reasons for it, but there's some programs now that we're evaluating at the Urban Institute demonstrations that are trying to go to the next generation and are extremely, extremely hopeful. I wanted to read, because I can't remember off the top of my head though. The HOST model, this is the HOST program, the Housing Opportunities and Services Together program in a number of communities contends that residents in distressed communities lack access to social institutions and economic resources that can help stabilize the most troubled and often disruptive households, challenging a community's ability to function effectively. Through intensive case management provided by community organizations, residents' economic, social, and physical needs are assessed and addressed. The model encourages providers to deliver individual and group services to build a sense of community and shared trust among families. HOST targets the most vulnerable families. So this is a program that's going in and trying to not only understand a whole person, which is really important, but a whole community, and trying to address some of these legacy of poverty issues to really make a difference and make change. And there are a number of these programs that are dealing with place, that are trying to look at communities and try and help by fostering the building of community so that the community itself as a support can be there as people try and move out of poverty and move out of their struggles. So the last piece I want to say about addressing the legacy of poverty is an example that someone said to me a long time ago that I think that is really quite true. She's like, I don't know anyone, any family, or any of my friends who doesn't have by themselves or someone in their family who's had some serious issue, that something has happened, that there's been some setback, that there's been some difficulty. But we have resources. We have a cushion. We have a net. Whether it be our personal finances and money we've been able to save, our family, our community resources, just the education to be able to go out and find the resources. All of those things are our personal safety net. People in poverty don't, it's not that it's something odd that a personal issue happens and the challenge happens. It's the lack of any resilience, the lack of any cushion. And that's a legacy of poverty too. If you never have the ability to build up any financial cushion, if a community is decimated and so you don't have those resources, if all of the things that happen that perpetuate poverty are there, then you don't have this cushion. So one thing that we need to do when we're in programs to try and deal with ending poverty is help people get opportunities, but opportunities to build this for themselves. And that's through addressing these community problems to build stronger communities, as well as personally allowing people to be able to build that for themselves. So I just end with my vision, again, here, of what I think it looks like to end poverty. And I really, really think this is possible. I think I deal with a lot of really cynical people. I deal with a lot of politicians that I'm trying to, and their staff, and that you're trying to convince of things to make change. And some of it's realism, some of it's the real world of, you know, here's how many dollars we have and what can we spend it on. But some of it is the lack of belief that anything can ever change. Just the lack of belief that anything can ever change. And as when I was introduced, as she said that I was a founding member of the Wider Circle board, even then, when Wider Circle started, I was working at my job at the Urban Institute doing similar things, working actually on welfare reform and trying to get messages out there. And I remember talking to Mark, who I've known for many, many years, and him saying, but our goal is to end poverty, to have zero. And I remember thinking, you're insane. No, I mean, and maybe I'm like was more in the Dana Milbeck kind of camp. Maybe we can lower, you know. And here I was working on it, trying to convince people to put money into it, trying to tell people things could be done, and I didn't really believe. And then over time, I realized there are these solutions. Things are happening. Things can happen. It can be done. And so I am a believer now, and I think that that is the place from which we can convince other people to care about poverty and that there is something we can do to end it. So I guess I'm a little early. I don't know if we want to talk. I don't know. Go ahead.
If you could comment on some people that might be in the other camp that would form a lobbying group to make a more progressive, thrust for poverty.
Well, I think obviously a lobbying group against poverty is really needed, and we need to be organized, and those organizing is really important. I think that there's a lot of ways in to the argument. There's a lot of, in the work on paid sick leave, there's some people I don't go and say, you should morally care about your neighbors in poverty and start there because it's not working. But there are a lot of things that can be said, and there's a lot of things, and it's why I do what I do in terms of evidence to show, not because I think that's always needed to know that something is right to do, but because it can show that it can work and that it cannot have the catastrophic effects that people think it's going to be. But I think you're going to comment on it, so go ahead.
I think what we need to do is empower the poor. We need to get them to vote. We need to convey to them that they are important, that what they think is important, and I think they need to vote. And I think that's part of the structural deal and the lobbying issue.
What professor at Georgetown, Peter Edelman, who's worked on poverty issues for a long time, says is that we'll never be able to change these policies, structural things, unless we can convince the middle class to care about poverty. And I think that is what all of us, our jobs is to do, and that in essence creates the lobby for it, to be able to have people care. So not only, I agree with you, but to have it be an issue that is cared about and talked about. And we see some glimmers, and sometimes there's, I mean, Paul Ryan did go.
What do you find the most difficult arguments against income redistribution that you hear?
So the most difficult, well, this what I hear a lot, and I'd say this is not necessarily from the inside the Beltway kind of people, although some, but you do hear from people you go out and talk to, and probably, maybe not in Montgomery County, but people say, I work really hard for my money. They take a lot of my money in taxes, the government. And I don't think it should go to somebody who isn't working. That I am working hard, and I don't want you to waste my money or just give it away. And I think that that's really, really important, because when I think about convincing the middle class to be, I think you hear that a lot. I think you hear that from people who are surprisingly Democratic leaning. And people, I think it's not, I think for me, that's my job to convince them that that's not what it is, and to really change that. And because I don't think that's coming out of always a hard-hearted place, I think it's coming from a lot of very strong messages that government doesn't work and all the money is wasted. So that, you know, right there, it's like, why are you taking my money? I'm working so hard for this money, you're taking it and throwing it away. So they're not understanding that, and not understanding what poverty means and what it is, and that people in poverty are working, right? That, you know, so all of those things. So. Well, I guess why don't we go right here, and then we'll go over there. But next.
Just to quickly ask about what you just said with the middle class, how do you convince the middle class that is rapidly disappearing that with the, you know, the big increase in the income gap, that many middle class people are not that far away from poverty? Maybe not the poverty that we like to think about, homelessness and things like that, but certainly a very different class of living, to make people realize that they do need to vote and care about it, because it's their own life that's affected.
Well, I think we saw in the recession plenty of people losing jobs and falling, you know, to where they never thought they would be. And people, many people taking advantage of food stamps and food pantries and programs in the communities who never thought that they would. And the question is, does that, hopefully, can we use that message as when they are out and back in a workforce and above to say, this is me. You know, this is me, I could be there. And like, hopefully all of us are thinking that this is me. But I also think making it us. If you want to get Social Security, when you're old, you need people to be working who are young. If you want to have a good growing economy for all those reasons, you need to have an educated workforce. You know, all of those arguments, I think, basically you cannot allow a huge percentage of your country to be left behind. But it's making those arguments.
Hi, I have a comment and I also have a question. I think most people have a misconception in terms of the middle class, what they think the middle class is. A lot of people who consider themselves middle class, they have a joint income of about $100,000. They have a job, they have a Mercedes, and they think they're middle class. I heard, I think it was president, or he was vice president, he was running for president, and he said the middle class is a combined income of about $275,000 a year. That's what he considered middle class. Now, I don't know how many people in here are making $275,000 a year. I own an IT company and I work in Germantown. And I consider myself in poverty. I mean, maybe that's my ambition, but I think some people, if you were injured or if you got hurt on the job and you missed 2-3 months of work, you will probably be in poverty if you don't have $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 or $300,000 in the bank. And my next question is that I also own a nonprofit which addresses these issues. I believe you could give a person a fish, you can feed them for a day, you can give them a fishing pole, you can feed them for a lifetime. But how do you impart this knowledge, this value into politicians who care about voting or care about receiving votes, but they don't really care about the people? You know, I live in Prince George's County, one of the wealthiest counties like Montgomery County, but they have some of the worst schools that I've ever seen. Then you pay your taxes and so forth. But how do you tell a politician that, why am I paying these high taxes and live in this $600,000 house and I wouldn't take my child to this public school because I'm scared he's going to get shot or killed? How do you impart that? And let's say if I even wanted to run for Congress, then the media is going to rip me apart for things I've done in college. So how do you impart that?
Well, believe me, I don't have the answers to those questions, but I think they're the right questions. And I think that talking about getting people to vote and getting people, I don't want that political hurdle to also make us paralyzed, right? I think it's important that we don't think it just can't be done because we see corrupt politicians or politicians who don't care or whatever, right? I think we can't give up that. But I don't know the answer to how to make it happen, but I think that's the question. Like, I think we all have to be asking that to each other and talking about that, right? I think that's exactly it.
You mentioned the New Haven Moms Partnership, but what types of policies, in 3 or 4 sentences, do you see emerging that must be reestablished and reinvigorated to address the sinking mire of older Americans who never thought they would be in the situation that they're going to be, and the people who never could get out, whose quotes were shown on the screen? So that's the question. What do you see in terms of reinvigoration strategies that are going to be necessary to deal with this reality?
You know, I listed here a bunch of different programs and policies and things that are happening that are just one little piece. Obviously, for every issue you're talking about, for the seniors and the issues there, for these moms, there are a number of different things that we have to think about, a number of things to do. I mean, I didn't even talk about education and talk about giving a person a fish or teaching them to fish, right? There are so many things that we need to do and that we can do in terms of making those things change. I can't say it in 1 or 2 sentences, but I do think that they're there. I do think that we can. I don't know, are we out of time? Can we just let this one lady have one?
I just wanted to say thank you for your work, because you sounded like maybe you were a little bit apologetic that you didn't have some direct program, but I think it's really important to have an academic who's doing quality research and getting accurate information, and your advocacy with political leaders and the think tanks, I think is very important. So please never be dismissive of who you are and what you contribute.